Good morning, class. My name is Varus Susui from the University of Fribourg in Switzerland. I got my master's in Switzerland in 1992, and I wrote in political philosophy. My thesis is entitled John Locke, Moral Politics and Natural Law as a Criteria of Political Justice. It dealt with human rights, with government, and political justice, of course. As we know that John Locke has been the first, one of the first modern philosophers, if not the most powerful advocate of human rights. In 1997 at the University of Ottawa, because a prize had been given to me on the basis of my work, in my master's work, I've been ranked among the doctors in philosophy, doctors from the French-speaking Switzerland universities. So in 1997, the University of Ottawa, the Graduate School of Research and Teachings, has granted me a doctoral grant, doctoral scholarship to go and do my thesis there, which I finished in 1997, and I taught at the University of Moncton, and now since '98 I came back to Switzerland, where I'm doing researches at the Institute, International Institute, Interdisciplinary International Institute for Human Rights and Ethics and Peace Education. Today's course is entitled Philosophy of Communication, Perception and Audition. This course is enlisted or fits the curricula, the module, let's say the syllabus, the module 2, reference number 0005-0205. It fits the syllabus in philosophy, the curriculum in philosophy. I will be dealing with perception, different steps or stages of perception, and different problem of audition. Perception and audition, perception, ordinary and critical or analytical perception, and we'll be dealing with problem pertaining to communication and problem pertaining to our different senses of, let's say, audition or listening and communicating a different problem that pertains to our communication, daily communication, and a more deeper process of communication, or more analytical process of communication. Well, perception and audition as a philosophy, as a problem of philosophy of communication, or theory of communication. This course has been given at Moncton University in 1998, and since I've been working on it, adding and taking out some parts, so it's a well-adapted philosophical approach of the problem of communication. The first things to do is to ask ourselves why this kind of theme. Why this kind of thing? Once again, I remember that the theme or the lecture fits the module 2 in philosophy, discipline philosophy, module 2, reference number 00050205, especially the perception of the world and subject and object of perception, sensuous and rational perception, truth, scientific perception, and its specificity. I'll limit myself to a certain number of problems and that are daily faced when we engage in communicating with other people. Well, the first question will be, why this kind of subject? Why this kind of thing? Why study perception? Is there any need of studying perception? This is the first question. What happens when we perceive? Do we perceive clearly? Do we perceive objectively? Or our perception are biased by our own sensations or the problems of the moment or problems of audition? This is where perception and audition is linked. And why choose audition only and not tactile, what else, vision, and the other senses of perception, objective perception, of subjective sensation. Why especially audition? Because if we choose audition, it's because audition and perception specifically seen within the range of, within the field of communication are the most two, let's say audition is the most used faculty or power or sensory faculty we use when we engage in communication with other people, where we can talk about tongue, faculty of taste, but the speaking a language is different from tasting a ice cream, for example. So we prefer focusing on audition and perception of what the other person, the speaker, the interlocutor is saying. So we'll be talking about different stages of perception and problem we will face, we'll treat in this, we'll approach in this course will be, first of all, perception itself, the first stage of perception, which we taken to be sensation, and the second stage, the organization of the sensory data, the organization of what we get as data coming from the interlocutor, the speaker, what we feel, what we get from it, what data we stock in our mind or the memory, and what do we do with it? The third stage of perception is interpretation and evaluation. So we have the first stage, perception. The first stage is sensation. The second stage, organization of the sensory data. The third stage, interpretation and evaluation. The second problem we'll have to deal with is the processes that modify our perception. What do we perceive objectively, correctly? Do we really get what the speaker is telling us? Or there is something we are distracted by, something by our surrounding, people who are chatting somewhere around us, radio playing music, riots on the streets. Are we distracted in our communication with others? So the second problem, the processes that modify our perception, involve what we call the implicit theory of the personality. Why this and that person has his perception modified, and by what his perception is modified? Is that due modification of his perception? Is that due to his own personality? Maybe the person is deaf, or what we call hearing impaired. He doesn't listen to sound correctly. Some people are not able to listen to treble voice, treble sound. Some other they cannot correctly listen to bass sound. So what modify perception, implicit theory of personality, is there at the basis of what we can say about, or in the field of perception, as a scientific element drawn from our approach, critical approach to perception. Well, the second problem is, or the element of reflection will be the self-testifying, or what I call it the self-testifying, self-concluding prediction. When we approach people in our communication, we wait for something, or we project something as something that will be happening. So implicitly, this is what also lies. We call it, in French, there is a word that we usually use, is the arrière-pensée, or we predict something that may happen when we approach the other person. So the second problem, we call it the self-concluding prediction. That prediction can be self-concluding or self-testifying, self-realized, or it can be blocked by some other obstacle. Well, the third problem we'll deal with is the primacy of the recent. Why do we focus on this element of a communication, of what the person, the interlocutor, or our speaker, the person we engage in communication with, why we focus on this specific element of what he's saying, specific idea, specific word, specific gesture or movement, rather than what he's saying? Why this and not that other element? We call it the process of selecting. When we pay attention to what happens around us, we call it the primacy of the recent. What a person, a speaker, tell us because of problem, obstacle to our faculty, obstacle that work upon our focus, our attention of the moment, we are pushed to selecting this or that other element in detriment of the others. So another problem to deal with is the stereotype or stereotyping. Well, we are accustomed to attributing this or that kind of behavior to this or that person, member of a group of person, member of a community. Let's say stereotype, negative ideas. Let's say, for example, oh, black people are this and that way, white people are this and that, they have this and that kind of personality, and this and that negative aspect. What we call stereotype deals with negative. They can also be positive, but most frequently, when we use the word stereotype, we talk about something which is not objective. So in this sense, we we will be focusing on the negative in stereotype or stereotyping. Fifth element is the attribution. Attribution. All these involved are implied in they are of the number of things that modify our perception. We attribute this and that thing to ourselves, this and that quality, but we deny it to other people. Things like that bias our communication process. Well, third element to treat in this course, it will be the critical perception or critical analytical perception. Why critical perception? We talk about critical perception when we do not take things easily, so to say. When we want to have more exact perception, more truthful, more immediate, unstained, that means undefiled perception. They are not biased, they are not full of noise from the surroundings, and we made effort, we endeavor to get the message that is conveyed to us as clearly, as objectively as possible. Well, there are, for critical perception, there are strategies that reduce the uncertainties, the negative element that come within the process of communication. The listening or the audition. Process of audition, we'll talk about that. The motives for audition, motive for listening. One of the fifth subject or theme we'll face in this course we'll discuss about will be the obstacle to an efficacious audition. We were talking about perception. Now we'll be focusing on audition as such. We have things we call active audition. The functions of an active audition, we'll talk about it. The techniques of an active audition, where we engage in listening to the other, but we give some hint at our participation by saying yes, by saying all this onomatopoetic sound of yes or assent are of the number of things we call active audition, elements of active audition. Remarks on critical audition, we make that remark too. What we call retroaction. When we engage in communication, we talk and then we wait for something, a result. Usually we wait for a positive reaction from our interlocutor or our listener. We call it feedbacks. We have positive reception of a retroaction or of a feedback. The field exploration or prospecting, the field preparation, when we want to bring people in our make people come around as when we discuss or agree with us what we do, we'll talk about it. Now, the problem with perception, the problem with the subject, the problem with the theme here is are the following. So why do we focus on certain things in detriment of others? Why do we focus on other people's quality that we like or love, and on the failures of people we do not like or love? On which basis do we judge other people? Do we judge them on an objective element or negative element? How to make, how to make more accurate or just judgment about other self, how to make more objective judgment about other people. Why does it usually happen that other people do not grasp or understand or seize what we are telling them? Why do we often misunderstand what people say? Why other people always misunderstand what we say? How to listen more efficaciously, and how to encourage others to say what they think and feel. These are the things we will be dealing with in this course, this lecture. To study the process of perception, the process of reception of messages, it is indispensable, it is useful to study the process of perception and of listening. To study the process of reception of messages, it is indispensable to study the process of perception and that of listening or audition. How is perception possible? What are the processes and factors that transform or modify our perception? Is it possible to have clear or exact perception? If so, how to achieve this? The audition listening, what process? There is an art of auditing, of listening. As for all art, it obeys the laws of perfection. All art obeys the command of perfection. How to better, to perfect or improve the art of efficaciously, if we do have any, the art, if we do have any, of efficaciously auditing. The course will be divided into two parts. The first part will deal with perception as defined. What is perception? And the second will deal with critical, analytical perception, audition. Perception is a subjective faculty or power. Subjective faculty or power of the self, of the agent. And this faculty or power lies in the center, at the heart of all communication. It is a stage, a second stage. It is the second stage of the function of our senses, which operates alongside with the stimuli, external stimuli, and which can be defined as the awareness of these stimuli in process. Perception is a second stage of function of our senses, which operates alongside with external stimuli, and which can be defined as the awareness, the having conscious of this external stimuli in process. If our senses and their function, sensation, are related with the outside, the external world, perception fundamentally consists in an internal process. It's related with internal faculties. As such, its operation adds something more to the immediate data of our objective senses. We can say that perception, the art of perception, or let's say perception, even natural way of perception, has to do with culture. It's determined, it's influenced by the way or by the cultural sphere we live in, by how we are educated, and so on and so forth. So as it's an internal process, and as such, its operation adds something more to the immediate data, the raw data of our objective senses, external. It has a specific impact on them, on these raw and objective senses, and it influences them. As internal process influences the immediate or raw data of our conscience, perception is a complex phenomenon or operation. Perception is a complex process. This means that sensation should be seized as a simple phenomenon or operation. The very first stage of perception. I call it the last stage of sensation. And we'll see why. Well, I think that it's clear enough. The data of perception, contrary to those of sensation, are mediated data, or data mediated by secondary objective faculties or power, which are responsible for the functioning of the primary process of perception. The data of perception are mediated by secondary faculties, objective faculties of ours. And these faculties are responsible for the functioning of the primary process. They initiate the primary process of perception. I do not want to enter into details and considerations pertaining and considerations pertaining to physiology, biochemistry, and brain neurology. If we talk about primary process and secondary objective faculties or powers of perception, it is because perception as a complex phenomenon transforms, it changes the external stimuli, a voice, a phrase, a sentence, a word, a shriek. So as a complex phenomenon, perception, the process, within the process of perception, data from the external world, the external stimuli are transformed, and these data or messages, and that the sensorial faculty or the sensitive faculty, the sense faculty responsible of sensation or powers, convey to our brain, and differences, profound and important, subsist between the external data of the sensorial faculties or powers and those internal and objective transmitted to the brain. Different, they can change. Contrary to what some experts say, Robert Tremblay, a Canadian psychologist or communication expert, Robert Tremblay, Joseph DeVito asserts, contrary to what they think, the process of perception is a double according to its stages, which are, in my view, the organization of the external stimulation, and the second, organization of the external stimulation is first, the interpretation evaluation, or what I call the evaluative interpretation of the sensory stimulation. We agree with each other, this Robert Tremblay and Robert DeVito, to a certain extent, but I just bring something I think subtle and fine enough to that, and this is what departs my analysis of perception and audition or communication process from theirs. So we have those two stages, and it's not triple process like they say. Because if we take into account the close connection between the first stage of sensation, of the process of sensation, with the last, the first stage, or let's say the first stage of perception rather, with the last or final stage of sensation. That means the apparition of the sensitive stimulation, which I call the first stage of perception. And this is the last stage of sensation, the apparition, the moment when the sensory stimulation enter our brain, our senses, our faculty of perception. And contrary to what they think, they are continuous and can be simultaneous, but never intertwined nor superposed. The zero stage of perception, sensation or apparition of the sensory stimulation. The zero or primordial stage of perception is the one which the sensory stimulation involve in our five objective senses within the process of perception. It is the one which the sensory stimulation bring along with our five objective senses within the process of perception. We should remember that the process of sensation should be distinguished from that of perception. So what we call the zero stage of perception solicits or call for the five senses within the perceptual process, the process of perception. For example, for those whose favorite food is pizza, when you hold a portion of pizza, you touch it, you look at it, you taste it, and you smell it, and simultaneously you hear noises. You can hear noises of the surroundings. The stage of perception proper, the organization after that zero stage of, which is the last stage of sensation and the first of perception, we have the stage of perception, the beginning, the initiation of perception, which is the organization of the sensory stimulus, or sensory stimuli in plural. Two principles governing the organization of the sensory stimuli or stimulus need to be kept in mind, which are the proximity or the nearness or closeness and what we call the closure or the focus or the selection, the selective capacity of attention. So first we have the proximity, the nearness of the thing or perceived, and the closure, that means the focus on one element or let's say multiple elements from what is perceived. Both things, both a category of both principles, those two principles, proximity and the selection, capacity of selection or focus, both of them in turn are governed by laws of association or association of ideas. The first principle, proximity, enables us to perceive, or more accurately, it offers us the immediate data. Proximity enables us to perceive the immediate data. It offers us the immediate data of our perception, not of sensation. As a unified whole, that means there is an operation. That's how it occurs. it offers us the immediate proximity. In virtue of this principle, we get immediate data of our perception as a unified whole. There's a hidden operation or unconscious, an operation we are not necessarily conscious of. For this reason, we can also call it a principle of causality or causative principle. The principle of causal link or the principle of causal unification. Example, when we see a utensil, a pan, or let's say a pot of warming water on a fire, we immediately infer that the water will be boiling sooner or later at a certain degree of its warming, when it reaches a certain degree of heat. And it's hard to do with the habit, customs. Or when we see cumulonimbus, they are dark clouds. When we see the dark clouds in the sky gathering and adumbrating the earth, we immediately infer that it will be raining sooner or later. Or else, another example, we usually identify verbal and non-verbal signals of people, of our surroundings as a unified whole within their psyche. We see this kind of verbal or that other kind of non-verbal signals of people, and we infer that, well, they come from the same psyche, and for us they are unified to a certain extent. Well, this last example is less obvious. The second principle we call the focus, the attention, the selectivity of attention. This principle we call, which is responsible of the causal link or the principle of causal unification, enable us to perceive, or more accurately, it offers us the immediate data of our perception. The messages or signals are completed wholes, perfect wholes, in the form of circle, as if they were closed, while in themselves they are just incomplete or imperfect. Example, irregular circles, even a series of a sequence of points or lines are usually perceived as perfect or complete circles. It always happens to us to be able to complete incomplete message with elements, sequence of words, ideas, or thoughts. What make us capable of this operation of our mental, of our psyche, is what we call the principle of focus, the causal link, which is responsible of our imagination, or something like divination. We divine, we guess what the person wants to say, even before he completes his message. We call it causal link, the principle of causal link, which seem to us able to complete them. We use words which we have some element, sequence of words, ideas, or thoughts, which seem to us capable of completing the messages that are incomplete. These two principles make us think of some archetypes or model types, or again some perfect examples of things or ideas, real, concrete, or unreal, abstract, there in the universe, I don't know where I can indicate, that in virtue of which we arrive at organizing the sensory data of our perception, what we listen to. All these elements of perception of phenomena proceeds from a law, natural, so to say, a law they observe, obey, or follow. They are subsumed under one law as a law governing or ruling our inferences. It is called association of ideas, law of habit, law of habit, law of regularity, if not custom. On the basis or in virtue of this law or principle, we always spontaneously associate the objects or ideas that we have the habit, that we are accustomed to seeing, to hearing, or to having in our mind. We have them follow each other, occur as in a succession, one after the other. One philosopher who has given detail of these processes, who have written as precisely as possible, or as deeply as possible, as analytically as possible, is David Hume in his essay concerning human understanding. The second process of perception in the proper sense is the interpretation or evaluation, or what other way around I call evaluative interpretation. The process of perception, properly speaking, begins at this stage we qualify as the second in the process of perception. We call this sequence of perception the perception in process interpretation evaluation, or evaluative interpretation. The denomination has to do, or the name we give to this process, this stage of perception, has to do with the phenomena that our mind experiences at that stage. During the process of interpretation, evaluation, what happened? We interpret and evaluate at the same time. You know, we catch and we judge, we evaluate, we assess, we appraise the message of the other at the same time, simultaneously. We examine the stimulus or stimuli as perceived, the way they are perceived, even the process, even how we perceive them, we analyze them. 2 or 3 operations at the same time. That shows us that our minds work as quick, as fast as possible sometimes. It can anyway. Thus the term indicates the inseparable character of the 2 perceptive operation. This unified, combined, simultaneous operation or process is as subjective as the first, at which the sensory data are organized. This operation assembles, gathers all the subjective experiences, the needs, the desires, the axiomatic system, the values, the beliefs, the physical and emotional state of the subject, and this subsists in his mind at this precise moment, together with his expectation and cultural factors as well, such as the moral values conveyed through education and culture. Briefly put, the evaluative interpretation draws from this element from all the representation of the subject, cultural representation, religious representation, affections and values, moral, social, political, and or economical, etc. As a subjective process, the evaluative interpretation of the one and same message differ. It differs from a person to another. Further, since it may be true that we never swim twice in the same river, as one Greek philosopher has said, Heraclitus, and since it may also be true that truth is function of our mental or psychological state, as this other Greek philosopher, the skeptic Pyrrho, said, it may happen that the same message differs from a moment to another in the same subject or person, just like the two principles of association above enumerated, that is, proximity and focus or selective attention, require a standard, a model or archetype, real or unreal, valid for all. The evaluative interpretation of the messages require general ideas or perception, nevertheless. Though they can change, there are some general ideas or perception, valid and same for all individuals, no matter their particular subjective state of mind or cultural development, psychological development, and so on and so forth. Now, the second problem to deal with now is the processes that modify perception. What happened during the time we are listening to somebody speaking? Between the lapse of time, which separates sensation, here the presence of the person, the smile he shows, if ever he smiles, the eyes sign he makes, if ever he makes some, and the wording of his messages, the word he chose, the diction, if he even words any, from the last stage of perception, that is the interpretation evaluation process. Between these two processes, then, 5 major psychological processes can influence our perception. These 5 processes are the personality and its subsequent theory, the self-testifying or self-concluding or non-concluding prediction. In French, we call it la prédiction auto-réalisante, or its failure, its absence. The primacy selection, or the primacy of the recent, primauté récens. The stereotyping and the attribution. These are potential obstacles to the good quality or authenticity of our perception. Let's start with the first, the personality and the implicit subsequent theory. We can, just for the sake of exercising, we can try to notice the traits or attributes of a person, the features of a person. And when questions of the like are important, are the so-called attributes of the person intrinsic? Are they primary, akin to the person? Are they inherent to the person or not? If it is the case, why is it so? Why can we say so? If it's the case, why? Are they intrinsic, rather apparent? So it suffices the person change the mood and then the trait or feature disappears. It does not belong to him anymore. Or if it is the case, is why? If it's not the case, why? What can conclude from this? What can we conclude from this? Alexander Pope's thoughts. I translate one of Alexander Pope's thoughts. He's an English writer. But my text, the text of the lecture, is a translation of mine. of my own courses. So I translate Alexander Pope's thoughts. Listen, our judgments are like clocks or watches. They never show the same times, and everyone believes his watch shows the right times. Like one crazy man in my country, remember I come from Togo, Africa, West Africa. Like one crazy man in my country used to say, the day all the watches will indicate the same time, that day he will surely be cured. This state of things means that our judgments are far from being objective judgment. The reason it is to hear that all judgments are subjective. Is that true? I don't know. We'll see. Or at least this is a subject to discussion. Pyrrho, the Greek philosopher, said truths above the Pyrenees, errors underneath. This is also a translation. La vérité au-delà des Pyrénées, l'erreur ici bas. But is that true? Is there really no objective judgment? If it is true, we fall in logical contradiction. We fall in this the logical mistake we call performative contradiction. What does it mean, performative contradiction? Meaning that we assert, assume, or deny the very epistemological quality, statute, or proposition, or judgment. We assume, deny, assert of which, but of these paradoxically, of these things, we are trying to establish the falsity or wrongness of them. We say there is no truth, no objective judgment, but in the case, what we say is also an objective judgment we assume. So we contradict ourselves within the same stroke of affirmation. Well, if following Heraclitus or Pyrrho, we hold for a truth that our perception and judgment are necessarily unstable, changing, then no theory of knowledge can stand as an unchallengeable theory. No theory of knowledge can stand as providing us with the truth or the true knowledge. And further, they are not worth the name theory of knowledge unless we fall in the performative contradiction here too. Hence, Heraclitus of Pyrrho theory cannot claim to be true neither. Even theories that ground the objectivity of our knowledge on the criteria of intersubjectivity will vainly claim to be true or just theories. Therefore, the aforementioned questions are judicious, are worth asking. They have been awaiting their answers since the dawn of civilization down to our time. Aristotle is right, perhaps, saying that in this field all is a question of probability, of verisimilitude. Other thinkers of our time, such as those of the Frankfurt School in Germany, link scientific truth of science with ideologies. This tendency shows that the social, economical, and political orientation, that's what we are talking about, cultural element bias our views of the world. This tendency shows that the social, economical, and political orientation of our societies and cultures largely or absolutely determine our judgments, our perception, our vision of things. Briefly put, our criteria of just and the truth. Hence, we should admit with Robert Tremblay, alongside with De Vito, now we come around them, we agree with them, that the culture wherein we are raised and grown up strongly marks the theories of we adopt or adhere to. We should remind ourselves that perhaps the other self do not adhere to the same theories like we do. Hence, he is of another culture. We are then entitled to talk of contextual or situated scientific theories of truth, contextual situated truths. The theories of the personality is defined as an ensemble of rules indicating which attributes are associated to which ones, or which attributes are associated with each other. But is that a real definition? In other words, can a theory of personality be reduced to a simple corpus or body of rules of attribution of traits, or features, or characteristics? If this is the case, then the question will be raised as such: what are these rules? It seems incongruous, misleading to define a theory of personality that way. For the only possible rules, or at least elements of rule of a theory of the personality, seems to be at least a constant observation, and B, A, constant observation, and B, analysis of the results obtained from this constant observation. If we had to take into account Heraclitus or Pyrrho or a cultural element, then we cannot pretend knowing or having at our disposal any objective theory of personality. The edifice collapsed. Any other rule will be inappropriate since there is no obvious logical reason against an unintelligent person to be both active and passionate or impassionate. There is no obvious logical reason against the fact that an intelligent and educated person can be both active and passionate or impassionate. At least according to our pragmatic needs, immediate utilitarian reason, or also simply according to the movement of our humor or mental, there are no obvious logical reason not to declare a person both loving and disgusting, or disgusting, sympathetic and antipathetic. There is no obvious logical reason, assuming things of the kind. There is no logical reason against our declaring a person interesting and annoying, at the same time extroverted and introverted, intelligent and unintelligent. Yet it is necessary to recognize that we are here concerned not with personality proper, but rather only a contextual or situated personality, or what is also called the empirical personality anyway, a personality in situation. This is the reason why the religious or the spiritual people indulging in mysticism and also have always warned against hasty judgments based on simple appearances. Even the Holy Scriptures, the Bible warns against this. This is the reason why they urge it upon people to always take into account the person qua person, that is beyond its multiple appearances, what he is intrinsically. Philosopher doubt whether there is any such thing. For beyond appearances anyway, those persons, elevated person, both beyond appearances and beyond the empirical, utilitarian, and or pragmatic personality, there lies a profound personality, the person per se, the soulful being that as such is absolutely perfect, good, As Rousseau will say, everything came good and perfect out of the hand of the creature, but everything is spoiled by the hand of man. Morality thus requires from the agent to express, unfold his personality in all his action, to actualize all the potentials of his profound being. This is also Aristotle's view when in the Nicomachean Ethics and in the Politics he said that man is a reasonable animal endowed with certain moral values, with potential moral disposition embedded in the depth of his being, hexis habit, disposition that the daily practice of virtue is supposed to fully actualize, to bring to full blossom. This remark leads us to the noetic or dianoetic or theoretical cautions or prudence or cares, phronesis, prudence, that make Robert Tremblay, for example, asserts the tendency to develop an implicit theory of the personality, enabling then to perceive the other self, can lead to the perception of traits or features supposed or induced by the theory itself, but actually absent in the person, by misleading theories. We take apparent things or theories, traits, apparent features, or which are even absent or just a projection of the theoreticians or theories. Thus, goodwill in the charitable actions or gestures of a friend will be perceived within this kind of theories, the framework of this theory. Goodness, charitable will, actions of a friend will be perceived because induced by this theory, while his true motivation is nothing else than income taxes deduction. Well, the person will show you a good action, will perpetrate a good action towards you, will be charitable towards you, but what he has behind, suppose you are income tax officer, and you are in your office, he came and he offered you some bottle of wine. What he has in mind is how you can cheat the government, you know. Kind of this kind of theory can make us unable to see or perceive anything at all. It can make us deform or falsify the distinctive traits or features or attributes of the person so as to attune them with the theory, so that to be in conformity with the theory, to conform them to the theory. We are thus led not to see or perceive in friends the bad characters which we usually see or perceive in our enemy. We usually perceive in our friends the bad character. In our friend, excuse me, rather in our enemy, their bad character, but we never perceive, we never see them in our friends. These are some prudential rules or prescription of the methodological order, how to solve the problem, to the intention of ordinary people in their daily relations, and to philosophers in their ivory tower as well. Well, now the self-concluding prediction, what is called by this name? It's also called psychological transfer or projection, anticipation, and it consists in transferring, transposing, or attributing to others our own apprehensions, feelings, sentiments, fears, or hopes, our good and bad psychological state of mind, so as to influence them positively or negatively. It's worth noting that this process is highly inconvenient, or it has important drawbacks. For the expected behavior of the agent of communication occurs or takes place only under compulsion or coercion or force. When you so transfer our feelings, sentiments to the person. We attribute our own apprehension to him. So we pushing him, we leading him into, we make him act the way we want rather than the way he wants himself. They are induced, his actions are induced, not self-consciously acted out, done by the agent. It is thus an action performed under a conscious or unconscious psychological constraint, psychological coercion, all things harassment. In other words, the so-called self-concluding prediction is neither objective or subjective. No, subjective. Strictly speaking, the action performed is not to be imputed to the agent, but the man responsible of the projection or transfer. This psychological constraint, conscious or unconscious, biases, transforms, denaturalizes, and negatively influences the process of perception in itself, and by way of consequence, the process of communication. Bodily, we perceive in the other self that which we desire or want from him, that which we want to see him perform as action. We willingly or unwillingly, deliberately anticipate his behavior so that it finally comes to being, performed not by the will force of the agent, by him, but by ours. We have a simulacra of the other's will in action, which is nothing else than our own will in action. Here the methodological rule to be observed is the following. If perception is to be authentic, transparent, that is not perverted, travesty, or veiled in its object, it should not be preceded by any anticipation. Hence, openness in the scrupulous observation and absence of judgment. The epoche, as it is called in the current contemporaneous philosophy, current of a philosophical movement or school called phenomenology. The absence of judgment, the openness of mind, wherein our minds can be or could be like a blank sheet of paper. This rule should be absolute rule, in conformity with the principle of the ethics of communication, even. Further, we should avoid Roger Bacon's cavern idols, prejudices or cliché. Unfortunately, the current of things very rarely conform to these rules. It is then necessary to avoid turning our errors into rules. The self-concluding prediction usually has 4 principal stages. The prevision of the behavior or situation, or again the prejudice. This is the first stage. The second stage, the adaptation of our behavior to our own prediction, which can also be called anticipatory behavior or prejudgment behavior. The third is the constraining self-concluding prediction, the constraining self-concluding prediction, or in other terms, the reactive behavior, the reinforcement of the prejudice, the fourth. It can happen that the self-concluding prediction shows itself to be authentic, that the interlocutor, the speaker, be prompted to acting in conformity with that authentic prediction, non-induced, if there is such a thing. In this case, we should rather talk of an authentic prediction and auto or self-realization of the prediction. That is a non-coercive non-forced prediction. There we are in the absence of prejudice. Here the question is to know if there can be a prediction without prejudice. Considering our remarks on the personality, that is, the superficiality of our opinion or view of the personality of the other self, proceeding from our own errors of judgment or of errors of perception or judgment. Second, if there can be a real, authentic behavior at all. It is therefore a characteristic of the second and third stage to reveal biased behavior, our own behavior and the other self behavior. Coping with this behavioral irregularity requires from us one or two things, just like in the process of perception and observation leading to the determination of the personality. First, the epoche, the purity or limpidness or cleanliness of the perceiving mind. It is necessary that the perceiving mind be as receptive as possible, free from any active operation of thought, any thought, analytic process, as a limpid wellspring, or an unstained virgin or blank tablet, an unstained board, undefiled board. Second, the positivity of our positive nature, positive quality of our expectation. Like one Hans Margolius says, only calm waters reflect things without distortion. Only calm waters reflect things without distortion. Only the tranquil, cool mind perceives the world justly, objectively, or accurately. Or like a Buddhist philosopher say, with and without judgment, everything become clear. The Pygmalion Effect, it's this kind of predicting the other person, interlocutor attitude, results in what we call a Pygmalion Effect, which is something very particular in school classes or in academic field or in education field. The Pygmalion Effect has to do with the expectations of teachers towards their students or school children. One teacher would like his student to be exceptional to the point of, damaging, to the point of pushing the student toward abandoning, to the point of ignoring the limits, ignoring that the student may have some limitation. And this can endanger the students or school children aptitude to go as far as possible in their education. The Pygmalion Effect. Pygmalion is P-Y-G-M-A and lion effect. So long as an ethics of communication sustains all process of communication, it is indispensable to observe these two complementary principles. Their conjunction gives what can be called active or acting purity of the mind. The active purity of the mind. They are so complementary that for us, it seems almost impossible to realize the epoche and the positivity of our expectation positiveness of our expectation on our own behalf and on behalf of others as well, while being constantly urged to act communicatively. The third is the primacy selection or the priority selection, The primacy selection or priority selection is the order of operation of the qualities or attributes of a person in our mind. The order of operation of the qualities or attributes of a person in our mind and the impressions or the psychological effects of the operation on other persons. It's therefore a technical term of the theory of perception or interpersonal psychology. We also talk of primacy effects or effect of prevalence, recentness, according to the attitudes and the importance of their impact on people appreciation. The practical application of the primacy effect lies in the fact that first impressions are almost always well appreciated. First impressions are almost always well appreciated, though they are not necessarily the best ones. When you see somebody for the first time, you say, oh, how nice it is. He is. But wait for 2 or 3 days, when you come closer and closer, you will see that the thing is not that nice. First impressions serve as a filter or spectrum of selection and of late information interpretation from a global impression made of positive attribute. It has been demonstrated that the person attributes which appear or present themselves in the following order: intelligent, dutiful, impulsive, severe, stubborn, envious. We see that it's from the positive one to the negative one. The most positive to the most negative one will be more appreciated than the ones in the following. Envious, though. So we start from the most negative to the most positive now. So intelligent, dutiful, impulsive, severe, stubborn, and envious will be more appreciated than envious, stubborn, severe, impulsive, dutiful, intelligent. This is why when we engage in diplomatic relation, we just show our best qualities first. But how is that men are more favorable to their positive qualities than the negative? This can be a question in intelligent one. Why? And isn't that rather a sign of their natural goodness, their being naturally of a positive, sympathetic, or enthusiastic mind? And how is it that he sometimes hates the same positive quality in other people by jealousy or envy? By jealousy or envy, when we see in the other person a positive quality that we lack, that we do not share, and we hate that person. Why is it so? This can also be interpreted as a constant will to be the best of all. This progressive, competitive mind turned toward the good, the best for himself in the detriment of others, seems to attest the pertinence of all positive conception of human nature. The rhetorical application of the primacy effect also indicates the importance of the order of argument in a speech. How are we to order our argument? In a discourse composed of 3 types of argument, it is always suggested to place the weakest arguments in the middle of the speech. It is the middle position which is usually and easily neglected or forgotten. It is suggested to place the most powerful argument at the first position in order to win the sympathy of the auditors just at the start, especially if these auditors, listeners, they have no knowledge or less of the subject of this discourse or speech. But we should bear in mind, however, that the psychology of the primacy effect of personal qualities can have serious drawbacks, among which the following. First is from the fact that the first impressions are not always the exact, just objective ones. An erroneous perception of people's real personality can occur, which will be just a general or global idea, that the situation of the individual, the context in which he is placed, enormously influences on his external aspects. It can happen that we mistake the real personality of individuals. Hence the necessity to take a reflective distance from the context. The influence can be called contextual effect. The second drawback is that the first and global impressions can lead us to distort the late impression. We can transform the late impression on the basis of the global and the first impression. Given the awareness, the consciousness of the primacy effect, an individual can easily appear or present himself with misleading appearances. We can call this effect the disguising effect of the personality. The two errors of judgment can be called hastening effect or quickening effect. What the French philosopher René Descartes called, you can relate it to him. You can relate this effect to him, to his principle of precipitation. We should avoid precipitation. We should dot, positively or negatively, I don't care. But we should pay attention to what we get in as first impression, especially when they are striking. Because people present themselves to have an effect or impact on other people. The stereotyping, what does it mean? This is a fourth. In the field of perception, stereotype is said of this habit of ours to describe the attitudes of group of people of the same culture, the same race, the same relation, the same profession, etc. It is spontaneous attitude and not reflected or reasoned, and it often represents people from a negative point of view, real or unreal. It proceeds from fixed impressions on people's ethnic or otherwise belongings. As for its dangers, the fundamental error of stereotyping or stereotype consists in ignoring the individual in the profit of his group. The individual exists merely for the sake of his group and irremediably bears the marks of this group. So is the opinion of the sociologists or psychologists of a stereotypic turn of mind. The stereotype prevents us from seeing the individual as he really is. The fifth drawbacks is attribution. What does it mean, attribution? Our people's mistakes are always in front of us, ours are far back behind us. People close to us, other people mistakes are always in front of us, appear to us clearly, but ours, our own self, our own mistake are far back behind us. This is from Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, Roman philosopher. Attribution consists in an imputation of responsibility either to ourselves, especially when it comes to good actions, or to others, especially when it comes to bad actions. In the first case, when it comes to good action, the responsibility is often attributed to oneself for the sake of self-glorification. This is what is called the self-prejudice, préjugé, meaning prejudice in favor of oneself, which is only one of the dangers of attribution. True it is that for some people, an external force lies at the origin of this action. God, for example, in case the person is a true believer, or for a superstitious person to some other spirit. But if it comes to wrong deeds, they are imputed to either the devil or some evil spirits. When it's a good action, then it's God. It is, that spirits of one great masters of mankind. But if it's a wrong action, then it's the devil or some evil spirit. In this case, the responsibility is attributed to other person or to external forces equally. Attribution goes together and always with the evaluation of actions. Thus, we are always prompted to judging others or ourselves. As such, this human fact or attitude rather, is not negative, were it not the case that we are fallible, we mislead ourselves, we are not pure, we are not mistakeless, we are not without fault, simply. We mislead ourselves on our real responsibility. We mistake our own real responsibility or guiltiness and that of others as well. If we cannot keep away from judging, we at least should be cautious when asked to, when judging. The best is to endeavor not to judge, not to indulge in judging often. If it is to abstain from it as such as possible. Self-love makes us to always depreciate other people's judgment when it is not favorable to us. Since we cannot suppress this faculty, self-love in us, and since we always perceive negative judgment as threat, as a menace for our image, a threat to our image, personal danger for our image, personality, at least as degrading our self-esteem, since we cannot suppress this faculty of judgment, self-love in us, and since we always perceive negative judgment as a danger for our image, personality, at least as degrading our self-esteem, the best to do is to abstain from judging, and when asked to do so, to endeavor being as positive, as constructive as possible. As some people say, negative criticism always brings suffering. If you cannot make any positive and constructive judgment on a given subject, abstain from judging. The rule here to be observed is what is called the avoidance of excessive attribution. Attribution always goes with a tendency to anticipate other people's thoughts. That is the pretension to read in other people's mind, to read their thoughts, the tendency to divine their thoughts. People become detective, private detective, trying this way to capture or seize the motives of others' acts. In fact, we really are incapable of it. unless by some wicked devices, by some dark psychological or mental harassment and manipulative, or by some witchcraft technique or magical method. This, however, endanger people in their relations. Our judgments are said to be mere hypotheses. It is therefore important to scrupulously inquire into the matters at hand before making any judgment on the others. At least we should keep in mind the status of our judgment as mere hypotheses and not take them to be real facts. This is the end of the first part of this lecture. Fortunately, there are a lot of moral, psychological approach of the human being, and I wish the student to scrupulously, cherish. I wish they could cherish this lecture, which I think is really helpful for a person, public person or whatever, to be as positive as possible, to approach other people on a moral, with a moral mind, morally absorbed mind, I would say. So thank you very much. I'm happy that there are such a lot of stuff for moral stuff within this course on perception and audition.